Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss how Boris Johnson's Trump-like attitude of excluding members of the press who don't lick his infected boots could be biting him on his equally infected arse. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, this all started really before the coronavirus crisis. Press briefings have always traditionally taken place at Westminster. Ministers turn up, are asked questions by the assembled press, and then do their best not to answer any of them. But then Boris Johnson changed a few things. So instead of holding the press briefings at Westminster, where he has no control over which reporters are allowed in, he switched to Downing Street, where he has complete control. And there was initially some togetherness on this amongst journalists when he first tried it. A load of journalists came to Downing Street, all representing valid media, the sort of media that would normally turn up to the Westminster briefings, and then they started to filter them out, at which point even the journalists that were going to be let in just staged a walkout and said, no, this isn't acceptable. And with the coronavirus emergency, this particular form of assault on a free press and the rights of journalists to scrutinise government decisions seems to have fallen under the radar somewhat, and so it would have remained, except that the government's handling of things in 2020 has so far been so atrocious that all but the most fanatical of news media have been quite scathing in their criticism. This has included the normally very pro-conservative Times, Sunday Times, the Financial Times, sometimes even the Telegraph, all of whom have run regular face palms towards the government's behaviour, particularly with the coronavirus crisis. And although government attempts to suppress their poor handling might work in the short term, they'll not escape any serious inquiry later on. Boris Johnson may be fooling many of his supporters now by saying that, well, we never ran out of hospital beds, people said we would and we didn't. But we know that the reason for this is because they only achieved that by refusing to admit most coronavirus patients, telling them to die in their homes instead. It killed two birds with one stone from their point of view. The NHS didn't break from the decade of Tory negligence, and they got to massively underreport the figures of coronavirus deaths, which would look quite staggeringly bad if they published the real values. But a future inquiry will draw people's attention to this fact. They're not going to get away with it long term. And it's not only the left-wing media that is doing so right now. So at the weekend, the Sunday Times was banned from press briefings because of its criticism of the government's handling of the crisis. There was also a suggestion that any other newspaper that showed support for the Times, obviously Boris Johnson, remembering what happened the first time he tried to do this, would face the same treatment. In response, the Sunday Times warned the government against picking a fight with the media, and it is a warning that the government should probably heed. The media is the real power in this country, not the government, not even really Parliament. This is not something I'm happy about at all, but it is a fact. The reason why Boris Johnson is in power right now is not because of his association with the mastermind Dominic Cummings, and it's certainly not because of his own qualities. It is 100% because the bulk of the news media, by circulation, backed him and savaged his opponents. And if Johnson's decision to ban the Sunday Times was supposed to bring them to heel, well, that isn't how it's worked out at all. In fact, it's failed spectacularly. Journalists and editors are not stupid. They know where the balance of political power lies in this country, and it is not with the Prime Minister. And without Boris Johnson doing anything awful or stupid for the rest of his days, which he absolutely will, but if it doesn't, the Sunday Times could still easily hammer him every week for a year or more with what he's already done up to this point. And the Sunday Times, it's worth noting, is the best-selling newspaper in this country when you exclude the tabloids. Obviously the tabloids have much wider circulation, but of the more serious newspapers, the Sunday Times is the one. And they also represent, along with the Financial Times, the money in the country. You know, as long as the Daily Mail and the Sun keep backing the government, well, you know, that's going to keep a lot of Tory supporters on the side of Boris Johnson. But ultimately the money reads the Times and the Financial Times, and they have not been at all happy with the government's handling of either the coronavirus or the Brexit negotiations so far this week. And pissing them off is not really like annoying the Guardian or the Mirror, because they can easily get away with that. They're left-wing newspapers. They'll never really have much good to say about the government. whilst it is a Conservative government, that is. Or even the Telegraph. They could afford to piss off the Telegraph, not that he's really been doing that. And it will be interesting to see if the government does climb down this week, given that the Sunday Times has refused to back down themselves. And if not, what the Sunday Times decides to lead with next week. But in his fear of scrutiny, it could well be that Boris Johnson is playing with fire here and risks biting the hand that feeds him, because without the media on his side, he's not going to have any credibility in the country. So I hope you found the video interesting anyway. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, then please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.